state compensation or a cushion against 0.5.
Religion and spirituality are gaining traction in the workplace as employers see the benefits of faith-based practices like recognizing religious holidays, and these efforts actually boost employees' well-being, morale, as well as productivity. And with Easter fast approaching, employers should ensure fairness as well as consistency in, of course, managing religious leave by adopting inclusive policies and clear communication. Advocate Tertius Wessels, who is a managing director at the Strata-g Labour Solutions, joins us now for further understanding. Advocate, it's great to have you with us on the show. Welcome. So with South Africa specifically at this current moment having no specific legal right to religious leave beyond, of course, the two officially recognized public holidays, which is Christmas and Good Friday, what strategies then can employers use to ensure fairness as well as consistency when approving leave requests for different religious holidays? And how can they also balance business needs with employees' needs?
So good afternoon, and good afternoon to the viewers. Great to be part of the show. The issue of accommodating various religious holidays is gaining more traction. And employers can actually adopt various strategies in order to ensure that they deal with any requests for leave to observe a religious holiday in a fair and consistent manner. Probably the first and probably the most important is creating and implementing a comprehensive leave policy. This policy not only outlines the organization's commitment to a workplace that is free from discrimination, that respects religious holidays, but also a commitment to ensuring that it gets dealt with in a fair and consistent manner. It should outline the process is important so that employees know and understand what procedures they need to follow when making an application or request for leave. But it's also important to ensure that it stipulates how these requests will be evaluated and the criteria that will be used. And once we've developed this policy, it's also another strategy is to engage with the employees, because ultimately by affording employees the opportunity to be heard, to raise their concerns and provide their suggestions, we are able to identify areas of possible improvement. And of course, it fosters a sense of fairness. And because the employment relationship is built on mutual trust and respect, it's when we have transparency in our decision-making process that we all feel that we are being treated fairly and within that workplace. And then obviously it's all about communicating the policy, ensuring that employees receive the requisite training so that they also understand the procedures, the criteria, and how the business is going to balance its needs with the needs of the employees.
Absolutely, Advocate, because, I mean, South Africa, I suppose, we live in such a culturally diverse nation, so we have to have all these provisions within, of course, our employment contracts there. But, Advocate, what are some of the common challenges that employers still face when managing leave requests for different religious holidays, and how can they be addressed? Because, let me give you an example. We actually covered a story on traditional healers this week on the SABC News who actually struggled to get paid leave, even approval of this leave to go for their training related commitments. And it says here, according to the law, employer acceptance, employers are not necessarily obligated to accept medical certificates from unregistered traditional healers for paid sick leave and unpaid leave. An employer may grant an employee unpaid leave if they, of course, produce a medical certificate, but from an unregistered traditional healer, but they should not be penalized for doing so.
Yeah, so I think we sometimes underestimate the challenges that employers face when having to deal with a diversified workforce. And undoubtedly, you are going to have a diverse workforce unless you're living in a small town somewhere where everybody practices the same religion. So as much as there are challenges in dealing with sick leave and balancing traditional healers versus medical practitioners, likewise, the same kind of challenges employers have when dealing with requests for different religious holidays. Because on the one hand, you have the challenge of now having to coordinate all the various different religious holidays with employees' work schedules, which could result in staff shortages, which then could impact on operational efficiencies. Certain industry, I think about the healthcare sector, requires staff almost on a 24/7 basis. So their careful planning goes into establishing a fair, normal roster. Now, if you're accommodating all the various religious holidays, that may have an impact and complicate the scheduling of those shifts. And on top of that, and I think probably the most difficult or biggest challenge that employers have is the legal consequences. Because if you do not deal with these requests in a fair and consistent manner, you run the risk of being accused of bias and, of course, of discrimination if you grant leave for certain employees but not for others.
Very important indeed, Advocate. So how can then employers ensure that they are providing reasonable accommodations for employees' sincerely held religious beliefs while also maintaining that fine balance of business operations and productivity, as you've just alluded?
Yeah, that balancing of the different needs will always be a challenge. But there are certain things that employers can do from a working hours or working hours or work scheduling perspective, as well as from to accommodate the religious expression within the workplace. So to give you some examples, employers could allow employees to adapt their working hours in order to work in some hours on certain days so that they could then potentially have time off to go and observe a religious practice on another day. They could allow employees the ability to practice remote working, if that's possible, because that will enable the employee to also participate in religious activities. Or they could even allow employees to swap out shifts with one another, if that's possible. But there's things that you can do in the workplace. For example, allow or create a quiet private space for like a prayer room or for meditation. You can also allow employees to engage voluntarily in certain religious practices during their breaks. And you can also incorporate exceptions as part of your dress code to accommodate for religious beliefs.
Absolutely, Advocate. I mean, we've seen quite a lot of these actually in various companies that have actually taken this route where they actually do allow those employers to actually practice their multi-diverse culture as well as belief. Thank you so much, Advocate, for your input this afternoon. Very informative there. That is Advocate Tertius Wessels, MD at Strata-g Labour Solutions, assisting us on employers and the approval of religious leave or holidays.